Mark had always liked quiet places. His small cabin stood at the edge of a long dirt road in Arizona, where the land stretched wide and empty, and the sunsets painted every cloud in shades of orange and gold. Most days were simple for him. He woke early, tended to his little garden, repaired things around the house, and sometimes drove into town for supplies. He lived alone, not because he disliked people, but because peace felt easier than conversation. He carried the weight of old memories and rarely let anyone close. On one warm afternoon, as the sun slid lower in the sky, Mark drove back toward his cabin after a long day in town. His truck moved slowly over the rough road, bouncing lightly on the uneven ground. He hummed to himself and looked forward to getting home, maybe making tea and sitting on the porch to watch the evening settle in. But as he rounded a curve, he noticed something unusual up ahead, a figure walking along the edge of the dusty road. At first, he thought it might be a traveler or a hiker, but as he drew closer, he saw a young woman, moving slowly as if tired or unsure of her path. She wore clothes dusted from the trail, and her long, dark hair drifted in the wind. There was an air of calm strength about her. Yet something in her step seemed uncertain. Mark eased his truck to a stop a short distance away, not wanting to startle her. The woman turned her head slightly, watching him with careful eyes. Mark got out of the truck gently, keeping his distance. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm fine, I think." Her voice held both confidence and weariness. "My name is Nayeli." Mark nodded politely. "I'm Mark. Do you need help? This road doesn't lead to many places." Nayeli looked down the path, as if trying to measure how far she had walked. "I was traveling with family earlier today," she said. "I stepped away for a while to explore and lost track of where I was. When I came back, they were already on the move, and I had trouble finding the trail again. I kept walking, hoping to recognize something. But everything looks the same right now." Mark glanced at the sky. The sunlight had begun to fade, and a few dark clouds gathered in the distance. Rainstorms in that region often arrived quickly and without warning. "You're a long way from town," he said. "And the weather looks like it might turn soon. You're welcome to rest at my cabin until things clear up. It isn't far from here." Nayeli studied his face, as though listening not only to his words, but to the quiet tone beneath them. She seemed cautious but not afraid. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Thank you, I would appreciate that." Mark opened the passenger door for her, stepping aside politely. She climbed in with a grateful nod, placing a small bag on her lap. He returned to the driver's side and started the engine. As they drove, the early evening breeze picked up, rustling the dry grass along the road. The sky dimmed to a soft purple, and the first smell of damp earth floated through the open windows. For a while, they rode in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the kind of quiet two people share, when neither wants to force conversation. Eventually, Nayeli spoke. "You live out here alone?" she asked. Mark nodded. "Most of the time, yes. It's peaceful. I work on small projects, help neighbors sometimes, fix things around the place. I guess I like the stillness." Nayeli smiled faintly. "Stillness is a kind friend." Mark glanced at her, surprised at how naturally she put it. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." After another short stretch, the cabin came into view, a simple wooden home with a porch, surrounded by a few tall pines and a small garden. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, showing that Mark had left a low fire burning before he left. He parked the truck, and they stepped out together. The air had grown cooler, and the wind carried the distant rumble of thunder. "You can come inside," he said, leading her toward the front door. "It's warm, and the storm might arrive soon." Nayeli followed him, looking around with quiet interest. Something about her presence seemed calm, yet full of hidden stories. Inside, the cabin felt cozy. Soft light from a lamp warmed the wooden walls. A few books rested on a shelf near the fireplace, and handmade blankets were draped over the sofa. Everything about the place felt lived in but gentle. as though the home itself had a steady heartbeat. Nayeli slipped off her shoes and looked around with a soft smile. "Your home feels peaceful," she said thoughtfully. "Thank you," Mark replied. "It's a bit old, but it works." He offered her water and set a warm cup in her hands. As she sat at the small table, she seemed to relax, her shoulders easing, as though she had finally found a place where she could catch her breath. "You mentioned you were traveling with family?" Mark asked carefully, not wanting to pry too much. "Yes," she said, her fingers brushing the cup slowly. "My family often visits different parts of our ancestral land. It helps us stay connected to the stories and history that shaped us. Today, I walked ahead for a little while. I like exploring, but I wandered farther than I meant to." Mark listened with genuine interest. "That sounds meaningful, your connection to the land." "It is," she said softly. "It carries the footsteps of many generations. Being on it feels like being held." Mark admired her words. They carried depth and a quiet wisdom he seldom heard in everyday conversations. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. A flash of pale light lit up the clouds outside. "Looks like you came at the right time," Mark said. "The storm is almost here." Nayeli looked out the window, watching the sky with calm acceptance. "Nature speaks in many ways," she said. "Tonight, it speaks loudly." Mark chuckled lightly. "I guess it does." He tended to the fireplace, adding another log. The crackling sound filled the room, warm and steady. Nayeli sat nearby, her eyes reflecting the glow of the flames. She appeared thoughtful, as though she carried stories she rarely shared. After a while, she turned to Mark. "Thank you for helping me," she said sincerely. "Many people might have driven past without stopping." Mark shook his head. "No one should be left alone on a road before a storm. Besides, you looked like you needed a place to rest." "I did," she admitted quietly. "More than I realized." Their eyes met for a moment. Not in a romantic way yet, but in a gentle recognition, two people who had walked different paths but shared a similar loneliness, even if neither had spoken it aloud. To lighten the mood, Mark asked, "Are you hungry? I can make something simple." Nayeli smiled. "Only if it's not too much trouble." "It's no trouble," he said, standing to gather ingredients. As he cooked, she watched him with interest. He moved with practiced ease, comfortable in his small kitchen. The smell of warm spices filled the air, and soon the cabin felt even more inviting. They ate together at the wooden table, sharing light conversation. Nayeli spoke about her love for old stories, traditions, and the calm she found in walking through nature. Mark spoke about his quiet life, his love for making things by hand, and the long days he spent in peaceful solitude since his father passed years ago. There were no dramatic revelations, no heavy emotions, just two people discovering each other's thoughts and experiences in a gentle, steady flow. As they talked, the storm finally broke outside. Rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windows. The wind whistled around the corners of the house, but the cabin stayed warm and safe, wrapped in the glow of the fire and the soft rhythm of their voices. At one point, Nayeli laughed quietly at something Mark said, a warm sound that filled the room like sunlight. Mark felt something ease inside him, something that had been tightly closed for a long time. He did not understand it yet, and he did not need to. For now, the moment simply felt right. Hours passed without them noticing, and the storm outside grew stronger. But inside the cabin, everything felt calm and steady. A sense of comfort grew between them, simple, natural, and unexpected. As night deepened, Nayeli glanced at the window, where rain blurred the world beyond. "Thank you again," she said softly, "for the food, and the shelter, and the company." "You're welcome," Mark replied. "I'm glad you're here." And in that gentle, quiet moment, something shifted between them softly, quietly, almost like a seed planted without either of them realizing it. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something warm, something human, something true. A feeling that, by the time night fully fell, neither of them would be able to ignore. The storm continued through the evening, wrapping the cabin in a steady rush of wind and rain. Mark added another log to the fireplace, and the soft glow filled the room with warmth. Nayeli sat near the fire, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea Mark had prepared. The light from the flames touched her face in gentle shades of gold and amber. She looked peaceful now, no longer tired from walking all day. Mark sat across from her at the small table, watching the fire flicker. The quiet between them felt comfortable, like two people who had known each other for longer than a few hours. The storm outside somehow brought them closer inside, as if the cabin itself had become a small world just for the two of them. Nayeli set her cup down and looked around the home with interest. "Your cabin has a very comforting feeling," she said softly. Mark smiled. "I built most of it myself over the years. Maybe that's why it feels personal." "You built it?" she asked, impressed. "A lot of it," he said with a humble shrug. "Repairs, shelves, the porch, things like that. I like working with my hands." Nayeli nodded slowly, admiring his quiet pride. "My family has many people who build things too. Homes, tools, artwork. My grandfather taught me that when you make something with your own hands, a part of your spirit stays with it." Mark's eyes softened. "That's beautiful," he said. "I've never heard it put that way." "It's something he always said," she added, smiling at the memory. "He liked simple truths." The storm rumbled gently behind their words. The sound was almost calming now that they were safely inside. Nayeli pulled her blanket a little tighter around her shoulders. "I'm sorry if I interrupted your evening," she said kindly. "You didn't interrupt anything," Mark replied. "Honestly, it's nice having someone to talk to. Most days, I just talk to the walls or the radio." She laughed gently. "The walls must know all your secrets." "They probably do," Mark chuckled. There was a brief moment where their laughter faded into a quiet stillness. They looked at each other, and for the first time since she arrived, Mark saw a peaceful light in Nayeli's eyes, like she had finally found a moment of rest after wandering for hours. She spoke again, her tone softer. "Today was supposed to be a peaceful walk, but I wandered too far. I didn't mean to worry my family." "I'm sure they'll find you tomorrow," Mark said. "Or you'll find them. The storm just made everything happen in a strange way." "That's true," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe I was meant to stop and rest for a while." Mark felt something warm expand inside his chest. He didn't know why her words affected him, but they did. He pushed the feeling aside gently, unsure what it meant. They moved from the table to the living room, sitting near the fireplace. The firelight painted soft, moving shadows around the room, and the storm outside softened into quiet rain. The peacefulness felt almost like a blanket around them. Nayeli tucked her legs under a blanket Mark had offered her and let out a small sigh. "This reminds me of when I was young," she said. "My grandmother and I used to sit by the fire and talk about everything. She believed fire carried wisdom." "Maybe it does," Mark said gently. "What do you believe?" she asked, turning toward him. He paused, thinking. "I believe in calm," he said finally. "I think people need quiet moments to understand themselves." She nodded slowly. "Quiet moments are important. Too often, people rush and forget to breathe." "Yeah," Mark said with a small smile. "I used to rush a lot. I thought if I stayed busy, I could keep my heart from feeling too many things at once." Nayeli observed him carefully. "And does that work?" "Not really," he admitted. "But I guess I got used to the quiet. It kept things simple." "And yet," she said softly, "you still stopped for someone on the side of the road." Mark looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her voice. "Of course I stopped," he said. "Anyone would." "Not everyone," she said gently. "But I'm glad you did." Mark felt something shift inside him, subtle, quiet, but real. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. They spent the next hour sharing stories, small pieces of their lives, simple memories that carried meaning. Nayeli told him about her love for open land, long walks, and learning traditional stories from her elders. She spoke about how each place held a different feeling, a different story, and how she enjoyed discovering the quiet emotions of every landscape. Mark shared stories about growing up in a small town, helping his father fix old cars, building things from scraps of wood, and learning to enjoy solitude after many years of noise and expectations. He spoke about the comfort of routine, the peace of watching storms, and the strange feeling that life had been waiting to surprise him again. As they talked, they learned small things about each other: favorite foods, small fears, quiet hopes. The conversation flowed gently, never rushed, like a river finding its natural path. At one point, the fire dimmed. Mark stood to add another log. As he turned, he saw Nayeli watching him with a thoughtful expression, as if she was studying the quiet strength in his movements. When he sat back down, she spoke again, her voice soft. "You seem like someone who carries a lot inside," she said kindly. Mark looked at her, unsure how to respond. "Maybe," he admitted after a long moment. "But I've learned to carry it quietly." "You don't always have to carry things alone," she said. He wasn't used to such honest words. They felt gentle, not heavy. But they touched a part of him he rarely let anyone see. He looked into the fire. "It's not easy for me to open up." "I know," she said softly. "But you're kind. I can see that." Her words warmed him more than the fire did. He didn't know what to say, so he simply offered her a small, grateful smile. The rain outside softened even more, becoming a light, steady rhythm. The world felt unhurried, as though time itself had slowed down to watch them. After a long, quiet moment, Nayeli looked around the cabin again. "I like this place," she said with a gentle smile. "It feels like a home that listens." Mark laughed softly. "I never thought of it that way." "It listens," she repeated. "Not all homes do." Mark glanced around the room, noticing things he hadn't paid attention to in years: the old photographs on the wall, the handmade shelves, the faded curtains. Somehow, with Nayeli sitting there, everything looked warm and full of meaning. Nayeli stretched her legs under the blanket and let out a soft breath. "It feels strange," she said. "I've been traveling for days, meeting people, hearing voices, seeing places. But I haven't felt this peaceful in a very long time." "I'm glad you feel peaceful," Mark said. She smiled. "Do you ever miss having someone to talk to?" He hesitated. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I always tell myself it's fine. I've grown used to being alone." "How?" "Used to it doesn't mean you prefer it," she said gently. Mark looked at her, surprised by how easily she saw through him. "Maybe not," he said quietly. "But I never knew how to change it. Maybe life changes for us when it needs to," she said thoughtfully. "Sometimes people meet for reasons we don't understand yet." Her words echoed softly in his heart. He didn't know if she meant anything deeper, but the thought warmed him. The night grew deeper, and a gentle silence settled between them. They listened to the soft rain, to the crackle of the fire, and to the quietness in each other's presence. It was not a heavy silence. It was peaceful, like two souls breathing at the same rhythm. Nayeli looked into the flames, her expression calm. "I feel like I've known you longer than just one evening," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark felt the same, though he didn't fully understand why. They shared a long, quiet look, not intense, not rushed, simply honest. It was the kind of look that made the world outside fade, leaving only the soft glow of a fire and the gentle awareness of another human being sitting close. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something warm and real, something that neither of them had expected when the day began. The rain fell softly, the fire glowed steady, and the night wrapped them gently in its quiet arms. Outside, the storm began to drift away. Inside, something else, something tender began to take shape. Night settled over the cabin with a deep quiet, the kind that made every small sound feel gentle and important. The rain outside had slowed to a soft whisper, falling lightly on the roof. Inside, the fire still glowed, casting warm patterns of light across the wooden walls. Mark and Nayeli sat near the hearth, wrapped in the peaceful comfort that had naturally grown between them over the evening. The air around them felt different now, softer, warmer, almost as if the night itself was holding them in a safe space where honesty could finally breathe. Mark felt it, even if he didn't fully understand it. Nayeli felt it too. Though she said nothing at first, she simply watched the fire with thoughtful eyes, her expression calm but full of meaning. After a long, quiet moment, she touched the edge of her blanket and spoke softly. "Sometimes," she said, "the night brings feelings we hide during the day." Mark looked at her, the gentle light from the fire dancing across her face. "What kind of feelings?" She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "Feelings we carry quietly. Things we don't say because we're unsure who will understand." Mark listened closely. He felt the truth in her words, as if they were meant not only for herself but for him too. "I think everyone has those," he said. "Things we keep inside." Nayeli nodded. "Yes, but they don't always stay hidden, especially when we finally feel safe." Mark's breath caught slightly, not in fear, but in a soft surprise. There was a quiet honesty in her voice that touched something deep within him. He didn't speak for a moment, unsure how to respond without saying too much. The fire crackled gently, filling the silence with warmth. Nayeli looked at him again, her eyes steady. Not demanding answers but inviting truth. "Today felt different," she said quietly. "I was walking alone for hours, unsure of where I was going. And then you appeared. A stranger. Yet somehow, you didn't feel like one." Mark felt something warm travel through him. He wasn't used to hearing words like that not directed at him. "I'm glad I could help," he said softly. "It wasn't just help," she said. "It was kindness. Real kindness. Not everyone gives that freely." Her voice held a gentle sincerity. She wasn't exaggerating or trying to impress him. She was simply speaking the truth. Mark shifted slightly, feeling something inside him unfold, something that had been dormant for a long time. "I didn't think much of it," he said honestly. "It just felt right to stop. To make sure you were safe." "And I am," she said. "More than I expected to be." Their eyes met again, and this time the moment lingered. It wasn't intense or overwhelming, just honest, soft, and real. For the first time in years, Mark didn't look away. And for the first time in a long time, someone truly looked at him, not through him. The night deepened outside, quiet and thoughtful. Inside, the warm glow wrapped around them like a gentle embrace. Nayeli pulled the blanket closer and shifted slightly to face him more fully. "May I tell you something personal?" she asked. "Of course," Mark said, his voice steady. She took a slow breath. "I didn't just walk away from my family today. I walked away from many things I didn't know how to carry anymore." Mark waited, giving her all the space she needed. "I've been feeling lost inside," she said quietly. "Like I'm walking through my own life but not fully part of it. I tell myself it's just a phase, but the feeling stays. I thought that if I walked far enough, maybe I'd understand what my heart was trying to tell me." Her confession was gentle, not dramatic, but it carried a weight. Mark felt his chest tighten, not out of sadness, but out of empathy. He knew that feeling well. "I understand," he said softly. "More than you might think." She looked at him with curiosity. "Do you feel lost too?" Mark nodded slowly. "Sometimes. Maybe more often than I admit. I've lived alone for a long time. At first, it felt peaceful. But over time, I realized I wasn't choosing peace. I was hiding in it." Nayeli lowered her gaze slightly. "Hiding is easy. Finding yourself again isn't. But it's possible," Mark said. "Sometimes all it takes is the right moment. Or the right person." When he said it, he didn't mean it in a bold or emotional way. It simply came out. Truthfully. And softly. Nayeli lifted her eyes to him, and the gentle surprise in her expression told him she had heard something deeper in his words. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence was warm, not heavy. It felt like the moment before stepping into sunlight. Nayeli tilted her head slightly, studying him with a thoughtful gaze. "You seem like someone with a quiet heart," she said. Not empty, just quiet. Waiting for something. Mark felt the truth of that settle softly inside him. Maybe I was waiting for a sign, he said. Or maybe I didn't know what I was missing. A soft smile formed on her lips. Sometimes we don't see what we're missing until it stands right in front of us. Her voice was gentle, but the words carried a feeling Mark couldn't ignore. It wasn't bold, wasn't rushed, it was simply real. Something inside him shifted, almost like a door opening in a room he forgot existed. The fire flickered, glowing brighter for a moment, as if reflecting the warmth growing inside the cabin. The shadows danced softly around them, creating a quiet world where two people could finally speak without fear. Nayeli leaned back against the cushioned chair, relaxing a little more. It feels strange to say this, she admitted. But tonight, I don't feel lost. Not the way I did earlier. Mark's voice was soft when he answered, I'm glad. You deserve to feel at peace. She looked at him again, her eyes warm. You do too. Her words lingered between them, like a gentle touch in the air. Mark wasn't used to receiving such kindness. He swallowed softly and let out a quiet breath. Nayeli drew her blanket around herself and scooted slightly closer, not enough to make the moment startling. Just enough to show trust. It was a small movement, but it spoke clearly. Mark noticed it, and something warm settled in his chest. He didn't move away. He simply let the moment be what it was, soft, honest, and full of quiet meaning. Mark, she said gently, I hope you know something. What's that? He asked. You're someone people can trust. Someone who brings calm into a room without trying to. Not many people have that kind of presence. Mark had never been described that way before. His voice was low when he replied, Thank you. That means more than you know. It's the truth, she said simply. The rain outside softened even further until it was barely a whisper. The fire crackled, giving the room a golden glow, and the night felt like it was holding them gently, allowing them to speak honestly in a way neither had expected. Time passed, but neither of them felt it. They talked about fears, hopes, small dreams, and quiet disappointments. They shared pieces of themselves not usually given away to strangers, and slowly, without either of them announcing it, the distance between them faded not through dramatic moments, but through simple truths spoken in a warm, safe space. Eventually, a soft silence settled again. Nayeli looked at Mark, her eyes warm and steady. You've made this night feel lighter than I expected, she said. Thank you for that. Mark looked back at her, his expression gentle. You've done the same for me. Their eyes held each other for a long moment. It wasn't intense, it was quiet and deep. Like two people recognizing something they didn't expect to find. Something inside both of them softened, opened, breathed. Their feelings didn't burst into the room loudly, they unfolded slowly, naturally, like a flower finally opening after waiting for the right warmth. They didn't reach out to hold each other. They didn't rush anything. But the connection between them became clear, warm, undeniable. Two hearts, once quiet and guarded, finally allowed themselves to feel. As the night deepened, the distance between them, emotional and physical, grew smaller, in a gentle, respectful way. They sat side by side, closer than before, sharing the same warmth from the fire, the same quiet air, the same unspoken understanding. For the first time in a very long time, both of them felt seen. And for the first time in years, Mark felt his heart open not in fear, but in hope. The night had brought them together in a way neither could have planned, but neither wanted to ignore anymore. What began as a simple act of kindness had grown into something deeper. Not love yet, but the beginning of something real, something soft, something meaningful, a bond that would shape the morning to come. Morning came softly, as if it did not want to disturb the peace that still rested in the little cabin. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear sky painted with pale shades of gold and soft blue. Sunlight slipped gently through the small windows, touching the wooden floor and warming the quiet room. Mark woke slowly, sitting up on the couch where he had slept lightly. He rubbed his eyes and listened to the calm silence inside the cabin. The fire had died down, leaving only the faint smell of warm wood. Outside, birds began to sing, their voices clear after the long night of rain. He stood, stretched his arms, and took a deep breath. Something inside him felt different today, lighter, calmer, and strangely hopeful. It was the kind of feeling that came after a night of honest conversations, a night where someone finally touched the quiet spaces in his heart without forcing anything. He turned to look toward the other side of the room, where Nayeli had rested. She was awake too. Sitting peacefully with the blanket around her shoulders, she looked toward the morning sky through the window, her expression soft and thoughtful. When she heard Mark's quiet footsteps, she turned and smiled gently. "Good morning," she said in a warm voice. "Good morning," Mark replied, returning the smile. The morning light touched her hair, making it shine softly. She looked calm, as if the storm inside her heart had also passed during the night. "How did you sleep?" Mark asked kindly. "Better than I expected," she said. "Your cabin feels safe." Mark felt a soft warmth spread in his chest at her words. "I'm glad," he said simply. They shared a gentle silence, one that felt natural and easy. Then Mark moved to the small kitchen area and began preparing something simple, warm tea and toast. The familiar morning routine steadied him, yet everything felt new at the same time. Nayeli watched him with a peaceful expression. "You're very thoughtful," she said softly. He shrugged lightly, smiling. "I just want to make sure you're comfortable." She nodded, appreciating the kindness. "You've already done more for me than you know." The kettle whistled quietly, and Mark poured the tea into 2 cups. He set one in front of her and took his own seat across from her at the small wooden table. For a moment, they simply sat together, sipping their warm drinks and watching the world outside brighten. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of understanding, full of the gentle connection that had grown naturally between them. Finally, Nayeli spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I'll need to find my family today." "Yes," Mark said, though the word felt heavier than he expected. "The weather is clear now. It will be easier to travel." Nayeli looked down at her cup for a moment before lifting her eyes to him again. "I'm not in a hurry," she said quietly. "I just know I can't stay lost forever." He nodded slowly. "I understand," murmured. But even as he agreed, something inside him protested, something warm that didn't want her to leave so soon. Nayeli noticed the gentle change in his expression. She rested her hands on the table and spoke softly. "Last night, something changed, didn't it?" Mark felt his heart shift. He didn't try to hide it. "Yes," he said honestly. "I think it did." She breathed in slowly, her eyes softening. "I felt it too." They didn't look away. They didn't rush to explain anything. They simply allowed the truth to sit between them, calm and warm. The quiet connection they had shared the night before had followed them into the morning. It was not a loud feeling. It was gentle, steady, like a small flame that refused to go out. After a long pause, Nayeli spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you, especially not yesterday, when I felt so lost. And I didn't expect anyone to walk into my life the way you did," Mark replied. She smiled softly, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt warm enough to hold. Then Nayeli looked outside, watching a bird hop from branch to branch. "When I walk with my family," she began quietly, "we talk a lot about paths. Some are chosen, some appear without warning, and some are shown to us when we least expect them." Mark listened closely. He wasn't sure where her words were leading, but he felt the gentle meaning behind them. Nayeli continued, "I think meeting you was a path I didn't see coming." Mark's voice softened. "Maybe we were meant to cross paths." "Maybe," she said, her eyes meeting his again. "It feels that way." The morning sun warmed the room more fully now. The shadows on the walls softened, and the cabin felt alive with quiet possibility. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The air felt fresh, washed clean by the storm. Drops of water sparkled on the leaves, and the earth smelled rich and renewed. Nayeli breathed deeply. "This land always feels alive after rain," she said. Like it's telling us to start again. Mark walked beside her, watching her with quiet appreciation. Do you feel ready to find your family? He asked gently. She hesitated, her eyes drifting toward the long road ahead. Part of me does, she said softly. And part of me wants to stay here a little longer. How? Mark felt a soft hope rise in his chest. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. I know, she said, looking at him with warm eyes. And that means more to me than you think. They walked a little farther, stopping near the edge of the road. The sunlight touched their faces, gentle and warm. Nayeli looked down at the path stretching before her. Before yesterday, I felt unsure of where I belonged. Now, I feel like I've found a moment of belonging, even if it's small. Mark nodded slowly. Sometimes a moment is all we need. Nayeli turned toward him, and her expression grew tender. Mark, I don't want to leave you behind, but I also don't want to rush into something neither of us fully understands. I don't want that either, he said softly. They stood close, not touching, yet feeling the warmth of each other's presence. The world seemed quiet around them, as if waiting patiently for their next words. Nayeli continued. What if, instead of choosing separate paths today, we walk a little of the same one? Just for a while. Not forever. Just long enough to see what this feeling really means. Mark's chest warmed at her gentle honesty. I'd like that, he said. More than you know. A peaceful smile spread across her face. Good. For a moment, they simply stood together, feeling the morning light settle warmly around them. The storm was gone, yet something else had taken its place, a calm, hopeful beginning. They walked back inside to gather a few things, water, a small bag, and what they needed for a short journey. Mark made sure everything was ready, while Nayeli moved with quiet confidence, knowing she would soon reconnect with her family but not feeling pressured to rush away from this new bond. Before they left the cabin, Nayeli paused at the doorway and looked back at the warm, wooden space that had sheltered her through the storm. This place will stay with me, she said. No matter where I go. Mark stood beside her. And you'll stay with me, he said gently. Their eyes met soft, warm, understanding. They didn't speak the deeper words they both felt. Because they understood without needing to say them, they stepped outside, side by side, walking toward the road. The morning sun welcomed them, lighting their path in gold. The land stretched wide, open, full of new possibilities. Nayeli's steps felt lighter now, sure and calm. Mark walked beside her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet excitement, a sense of connection, a hope born from a single, unexpected meeting. They didn't know exactly where the path would lead. They didn't make promises or grand plans. They didn't need to. What they had was enough. A gentle beginning, a shared moment of truth, and the courage to walk forward together. For now, that was all that mattered. And as they walked into the sunlight, the world around them felt bright and warm, like a quiet sign that this was only the start of something meaningful, something tender, something real.